Greetings, everyone. Well, it is Wednesday, and Wednesday means comic book day. Yeah! As everyone knows, well, maybe not everyone, but those who don't know, I'll tell you. Wednesday is new release day for comic books, just like Tuesday is new release day for Blu-rays and DVDs. But we do Doctor Who stuff on Tuesday around here. Yeah. So anyway, picked up a few new comic books. Not a big stack of them like I often do in the comic book updates, but basically some trade paperbacks that I've had my eyes on for a while. And finally found them on the shelf, so grabbed them and I'm loving them, and let's take a look at them today on the Multimedia Chronicles. Welcome back. I said trade paperbacks, didn't I? Well, the first one's actually a hardcover, so... Okay, anyway, it's a collected edition. Now, as you know, I picked up the second comic book series based on this particular property, and I still haven't read the whole thing, actually, but I've definitely enjoyed what I have read so far. I read most of the first issue, and I was told, hey, you know, that's not the only one. There's another one that came out before that's actually a prequel, so you probably want to pick that one up, too. I'm like, oh, cool. I'm, of course, talking about Pacific Rim, Tales from Year Zero. So this actually is a prequel to the movie, which more or less leads right up to the events of the movie. So very cool indeed. So this is basically, this was another four-part miniseries that they then collected together into this lovely edition. Try to keep the glare off it there, and I'll just give you a couple of examples of some pages, and there we go. Yeah, we got the humans desperately trying to, where are we, deal with the kaiju and not being able to get the job done, and all hell's breaking loose. And then if we skip ahead a little ways, there's something that should be familiar here. Where is it? Well, we got buddy Idris Elba, basically pretty nice rendition of him from the movie, of course. And well, you can see there, he's addressing the people. There we go. And where the heck is it? Oh, there we go. There we go. Gypsy Danger in the house. Yeah. So, pretty cool. Anyway, there you go. So, Pacific Rim Tales from Year Zero basically gives you the story behind the story, as it were, all the events leading up to. Well, we saw just kind of in the opening narration, well, this is all the stuff that actually happened in real life. Yeah. So, I've heard tell that there is a sequel to Pacific Rim in the works. Kind of why I'm taking a renewed interest in it. I just rewatched the movie recently, picked up the other comics, picked up these comics, so I'm ready to get my Pacific Rim on. Come on, let's get that sequel happening, guys. All right, next up, I recently reviewed the movie that was heavily inspired by this, so I really wanted to check out the source material, because this is actually a mini-series that I've been meaning to check out literally for 30 years, and, well, finally got off my duff and picked it up. Wolverine by Chris Claremont and Frank Miller. This is considered one of the all-time pivotal Wolverine stories, because this was the first one which really started to define his character as the one that we know, the samurai without a master, essentially. And that he's the wandering Ronin type. Remember I talked about the scene with the bear in the movie? Well, there's the comic book version. It's like right out of the... It's like they just tore it right from the comics and put it into the movie, which is great. And there he is going after the hunter who shot the bear with the poison-tipped arrow and stuff like that. So basically this is a story where Wolverine goes to Japan to meet up with his lady love. But then, of course, finds out she's got a bit of an asshole of a husband, much to his dismay. We actually meet with, let's see if I can get a good shot here. Pretty good cover art there. So he meets up with Yukio, who, as you recall, I really adored from the movie. So this is in the comic books. This is where he first meets her, and you got lots of Wolverine versus ninjas and stuff like that. Overall, this is just a really great story that I really enjoyed a lot. I just finished reading it today, actually. You see him getting drunk, drowning his sorrows, and beating the tar out of a sumo wrestler. But this is just a terrific story. I mean, it really moves at a good pace. It really gets into Wolverine's head, and you get a lot of his personal struggle and everything, and it's just wonderful. And then I should mention, in addition to the 4 issues of the miniseries, we also have 2 issues of the Uncanny X-Men, issues 172 and 173 specifically, which basically pick up literally right where the miniseries leaves off, so it ties in quite nicely. I should mention this is when Rogue had just joined the X-Men, so this is very, very early stories for Rogue, which is quite cool. And then something else, Storm kind of teams up with Yukio, and they're fighting ninjas and such together. And Wolverine fights the Silver Samurai in this as well. They have quite a brutal tussle. And I was going to say one other significant thing is we get the first appearance of Mohawk Storm right there, which we actually just saw in the X-Men Apocalypse. So there you go. So we'll put that. We'll put these over here. There we go. Wolverine center stage. Yeah, so really good stuff. I might do a slightly more in-depth review of that for an upcoming Comic Book Wednesday. There's a few more things I want to say about it. But overall, really enjoyed it, and can't believe I waited this long to read it. If you liked The Wolverine, the movie, I definitely recommend checking this out, because not everything from the movie is from this specific story, but a pretty sizable chunk of it is. You'll definitely recognize a lot of familiar stuff there. Then next up, last but not least, I picked this one up. We have the X-Men Epic Collection, and this will be Volume 12, covering 1985 to 1986. So this includes several issues of the X-Men. We've got issues 189 through 198 of the X-Men, X-Men Annual number 8, X-Men and Alpha Flight numbers 1 and 2, and the Nightcrawler miniseries, the 4-issue miniseries. Now, I was really keen to pick this up in particular because, funny enough, this book actually represents a good chunk of the era that I collected back in the day. The first year and a half's worth of comics that I collected of the X-Men. So it was kind of special to me personally, and kind of funny that this would be one of the very first Epic collections they put out of the X-Men. It's like, oh my god, these are the ones. This is almost exactly where I started collecting. In fact, what is it? It starts with issue 189. I'll show you the very first issue of X-Men I ever got. And I actually got it as a Christmas present in an Eaton's box full of assorted random comics from one of my aunts. And prior to this, I had read a little bit about the X-Men. I was reading about something else in Marvel Age magazine. It was an interview with a comic book writer. Can't even remember her name now. But she was talking about how the X-Men was one of her favorite comics. And I kept hearing these people mentioning the X-Men. The X-Men are really good, really awesome. You got to check out the X-Men. And I wasn't big into superhero comics, so I didn't really think twice about it. But then I got this stack of random comics from my aunt this one Christmas, and there was this one issue of the X-Men in it. And it was this issue here, issue number 191. And you got to understand, this is right in the middle of a massive story arc that involves the X-Men, the Avengers, and the New Mutants. So they're all smushed together in this massive thing. And even Spider-Man. Spider-Man's in it. And so this is the first experience I ever had with the X-Men right here. This splash page of Spider-Man strung up and bloodied and beaten, and all these characters that I don't know who the hell they are. I'm looking at. I didn't know who Vision was. Like, I didn't know anything about the Avengers at the time. I just assumed he was part of the X-Men. And I'm like, why is he putting his fist through that other guy? And what's going on here? And there's just all this really weird stuff going on in this story. Like, she gets her mouth taken away, and there's obviously this evil sorcerer guy who's messing with them, and it's just some craziness, man, craziness. And then, so eventually, I picked up some back issues and kind of got filled in on what the story was there. But in the meantime, I basically started collecting. A few issues later, I missed the next couple of issues. I eventually got them as back issues, but I missed the next couple of issues, and then I picked up. I think I started collecting it regularly from. Let me just see here. Where was it? Started collecting it regularly from. I think it might have been this one, actually. Started collecting it regularly from there, from 194 with Nimrod. And then got the fills. I got the back issues and such and kind of carried on from there. But I remember, what was it here? Yeah, this one. This is kind of a controversial cover at the time. Wolverine about to impale one of the youngest members of Power Pack. Kind of interesting. But, yeah, so, and this was kind of crossing over into, or was this the crossover? Oh, no, not quite yet. There was the following issue was a crossover with Secret Wars 2. And Secret Wars 2, by this point I was getting full into the Marvel Universe, and Secret Wars 2 was a big, massive, universe-wide event that I actually collected all 9 issues of the Secret Wars 2 miniseries and every single crossover. And I still have that whole collection. But very cool stuff. I mean, this is a great collection. Now, some people have been a little bit confused about what exactly the Epic Collection is and why, volumes seem to be getting printed out of order. And, well, yes, they actually are being printed out of order. There's X-Men Alpha Flight 1 and 2. I got that as well. Still have it somewhere. But what the Epic Collection is, the whole point of it is to ultimately have complete runs of these various key series. So you got stuff like the X-Men, you got Amazing Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, Iron Man, Daredevil, Avengers, Incredible Hulk, Moon Knight, Silver Surfer, Power Man, Iron Fist, Power Man and Iron Fist, and those are all. I think those are all the main ones that I can think of right now. Oh, they did an Ant-Man and Giant Man one as well. But yeah, what the idea here is to collect together definitive collections of all of these iconic series, at least up to about the 90s. So you're looking at about a 30-year span from the early 60s to the early to mid-90s. The reason being early to mid-90s is when they started to go really crossover crazy, so it's kind of hard to keep everything separate by title in that era. And besides, there are already editions out of most of the major crossovers from that era with all the relevant issues put together into one handy-dandy collection. So, as far as X-Men goes, you get stuff like Age of Apocalypse, the Extinction Agenda, Inferno, the Mutant Massacre, and so on and so forth. So you've got collected editions that have all the issues from those crossovers. I guess the Mutant Massacre wasn't as big a crossover. It kind of stayed more contained. There weren't as many X titles at the time, but some of the other ones definitely got pretty crossover crazy when you factored in, you had X-Men, you had Uncanny X-Men, then you had X-Factor, and then you had just X-Men, and then you had Excalibur, and you had, well, of course, the New Mutants. You had Fallen Angels, and there was like a lot of different ones. But anyway, they are being printed kind of out of sequence. Like, for example, with X-Men, you'll notice they have Volume 1, which has the first, 18 issues of the original X-Men, or 23 issues. Anyway, the first bunch of issues of the original X-Men. And then you have Volume 12, which is way later in the run. Well, why is that? Well, the reason being, the primary focus with the Epic collections, I mean, the ultimate goal is to have complete runs between, the 60s to the early 90s. Initially, however, their primary focus is to put together collections of issues that haven't had a lot of representation in collected editions before. So ones that either haven't been available for a really long time or have just never been available in collections before. And, this particular batch of mid-'80s X-Men issues, funny enough, the ones that I'm most familiar with, really haven't been collected together before. I mean, a few of them have, but not all of them. So that's where they decided to start. So I was reading some fans. Oh, there's a Wolverine one as well. Duh, I knew there was a significant one I was missing. But there's a Wolverine one, and the Wolverine one actually starts with his Marvel Comics Presents appearances and Wolverine #1, like his first ongoing solo series that started in the late 80s. And some fans were saying, well, why didn't they include the Wolverine miniseries and all of his early appearances? Because a lot of the other Epic collections include all of the early appearances of the characters. Like, for example, Silver Surfer Volume 1 contains all of his appearances prior to Silver Surfer #1. So he appeared in a ton of comics prior to getting his own series. And then they skip ahead to Volume 3, which is kind of the revival stuff later in the 80s, long after his 60s series, or 60s, 70s series. So a lot of people were wondering, well, why didn't they do that with Wolverine? It's like, well, obviously the Wolverine collection is meant to be his solo adventures collection, like when he got his own series. So they're collecting the Marvel Comics Presents stuff, which ties directly into that, and then just the Wolverine stories, and then obviously any crossovers along the way. But this, as you can see, I mean, if you want any proof, look no further than this. Hold on a second here. Yeah, right here. This really is more tied into the Uncanny X-Men than it is to the solo Wolverine series. And if you want proof of that, here's the final page of the miniseries and the front cover of the next issue of the X-Men at the time. I mean, gee, what's the connection there? They're not related. Yeah, so I mean, if you just had the miniseries in a Wolverine collection, you would have an incomplete story because it ends essentially on a cliffhanger that is continued in Uncanny X-Men 172 and 173, and I think it carries on even beyond that. But that's where the main story is. But yeah, well, and the other thing is the solo Wolverine story didn't appear until many, many years later. It was like 6-7 years later. So there would be this huge time gap between. Then there's also the Kitty Pryde and Wolverine series, which takes place about a year later. Specifically, I think it's immediately following the events of X-Men #183, if I remember correctly. Shortly after Kitty Pryde breaks up with Colossus. And then it's her adventures with Wolverine in Japan. And that kind of ties back to this, which ties into X-Men, and it's all intertwined. And just as this is Logan's journey of self-discovery, Kitty Pryde and Wolverine is kind of him being almost her sensei, and she gets her journey of self-discovery and finds, a lot of parts of herself that she was struggling with and such. And it's a great miniseries. So I would assume that Kitty Pryde and Wolverine will probably be in Volume 13. That's my guess. It'll be on the next batch. But so I'm looking forward to that, because Kitty Pryde and Wolverine has actually been very underrepresented in reprint form as well. I think it appeared in one edition of Collected Comics many, many years ago. There was a hardcover edition of it, which has been out of print forever. And that's it. Luckily, I have the original 6 issues. But yeah, and that was actually my first ever introduction to Wolverine in Japan, was that miniseries with Kitty Pryde. And I always liked the character of Kitty Pryde, and I found it interesting that in the movie they kind of swapped her out for Rogue. So Rogue in the movies has a lot of qualities of Kitty Pryde from the comics, at least in the earlier movies, where Wolverine's kind of a big brother / mentor, and they had a very sweet relationship in the comics. I mean, I think in many ways she helped to keep Wolverine grounded, and was just a great. They just had a great friendship slash big brother little sister relationship kind of thing. It was really nice. Anyway, yeah, so really stoked about these. I just devoured this. This was amazing, and I can't wait to jump into this as well and relive all those great stories that I collected back in the day. And I hope they put out a few more volumes, thus representing the rest of the era that I collected. I guess I collected originally up to... I started with issue 191, went back a few back issues to like 180-ish, and then I collected until about issue 220-ish, something like that. I don't remember specifically where I left off, but I just kind of drifted away from it after a while. I don't know if there was really any particular reason. I think part of it was that things were getting really crossover crazy, and it was just getting to be too much to keep up with it all. I mean, I really like this era because this is kind of the end of the era where everything was more or less self-contained. I mean, you had New Mutants and you had X-Men, and that was really it. That you had those two titles. And I never collected New Mutants. Actually, that's a series I'd really like to pick up and read. Anyway, I could just kind of babble about it all day, but I'm going to go. So we'll see you next time. So quick thank you to my Patreon sponsors, especially Kyle Pellegrini and Get Your Gorgeous On. Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate the support. And yeah, so we'll see you next time. Until then, thanks for watching, and sayonara.